On the TEDx stage yet, you are in for a treat on this conversation. We are talking with Cathlyn Melvin, and let me introduce her and let's get right into this conversation. I'm so excited. So Cathlyn Melvin is a messaging expert whose insight has been featured via TEDx, Thrive Global, Fempreneur Online, Much More Media, Captivate and Convert. She built this and so many other outlets. She has a degree in theater performance and over a decade as an actor, director, writer, editor, and educator. She draws on her diverse experiences to help mission-driven experts design and deliver their world-changing messages through TEDx coaching and done-for-you copywriting services. And when she's not writing or coaching, you can find Cathlyn baking something delicious made of chocolate or reading in the sunshine with her very snuggly and loudly purring cat, Tucker. So, Cathlyn, thanks so much for being here. Welcome to the Author's Leverage.
Thank you. I'm super excited to talk about all this.
Yes, I'm honestly, that chocolate reference has me thinking for sure. What's your favorite chocolate baked item?
So probably the one that I make most often is brownies, and there's a specific brownie recipe that I really love.
Okay.
But I also really love making cheesecake, and I don't do that very often because it's more involved, but it's a fantastic process. It's like very meditative, and then it tastes delicious as well.
I love that. It sure does. Well, Cathlyn, talk a little bit about your experience. I mean, you've been in the theater, you've been, doing a lot of things, and now it's all kind of come to a head to help people with TEDx stages. So tell us a little bit about that and your experience to this point.
Yeah, it's interesting as I look back at sort of everything that I've experienced in my life. There are a whole bunch of lily pads that I've hopped from one to the other to get to where I am right now. And so the first one of those actually starts way back when I was in high school. I wouldn't have been found on a volleyball court or playing basketball. My sport of choice was competitive speaking. So
Oh,
I competed in a bunch of different categories all the way up to the national level. I went on to study theater, and my first career was in theater. I spent over a decade working as an actor and a director. And it was actually through my first business, which was a children's theater company that toured across the United States. It was through that business that I started learning about copywriting. And so when I moved away from the theater industry, that ended up being my focus and sort of led me through the experience of doing a TEDx talk to have people be like, wait a minute, you have all of this background. You've done all of these things that sets you up so well. Will you coach me to get a TEDx talk myself? And so it was like those nudges from people in my community as I was going through that process that really encouraged me to add the TEDx services that I have now. So
that's amazing.
It's flowed.
I love that. And I have not had a TEDx experience yet. But tell us what that is like to be on stage, especially on a stage like that is so global, across the world with so many different amazing thought leaders and people who are just sharing their thoughts. So what is that like?
So it can be really different depending on sort of your runway to get there. When at the event that I gave my TEDx talk at, we had a dress rehearsal the night before. And I had, before that point, I had given my talk on its feet more than 30 times. I was feeling really solid. I was feeling really confident. I was excited about the dress rehearsal. And I was standing in the doorway of the auditorium with one of the other speakers waiting for our turn to go on. And she was kind of like fumbling with note cards anxiously. And she sort of like halfway looked up at me and said, I've never done this talk without my note cards. And inside my heart was like, like panic now. And I was like, you've been rehearsing, it's in there. You'll get up on stage, it'll come. Because what do you tell someone in that moment?
Right.
This about them. And so I think that one of the challenges that speakers can run into is that as adults, we don't have to prep something of this magnitude that often. Like the last time that we had to memorize something that was 10 or 12 or 15 minutes long was in high school,
Right.
in communications class or something like that. And so I think that you have an opportunity when you decide to give a TEDx talk to have that really confident and joyful and powerful and solid experience. But if you don't have the right guidance, if you don't have the resources, then you can end up on stage and feel jittery and anxious and in your head and trying to remember what your words are. And so one of the things that I really try to do with my TEDx clients is guide them toward that joyful experience. Even if their topic is heavy, even if what they're talking about is a serious topic, I still think that the experience can be one of joy and of power. And that's what I really want.
Yeah, I love that. And you definitely make it sound, appealing. I would say for sure that to be on stage in front of a bunch of people can be a joyful experience. And it really, really can. So that's amazing. Now, why? Because I know that our audience are authors, they're in some cases speakers or thought leaders, right? They're experts in their own right. And for some of them, I know that speaking is important and there's an importance there. Um, what is unique about the TEDx experience? I would say, apart from, let's say, being on stage at another event or doing podcasting as a guest, right? What is unique and what is, I would say, essential to someone who's in that space and wanting to speak?
So I think when you compare giving a TEDx talk to speaking at a conference or at an in-person summit or something like that, one of the things that's really different and that can be really valuable for authors is they're not looking for professional speakers. They're not looking for quote unquote circuit speakers who are used to going from stage to stage and sharing the same talk or the same kind of talk. What they're really looking for is people who have a message, people who have an idea worth spreading, that getting up on the TEDx stage is going to help them do that. And if you've already written a book, you know what your big idea is. And then when you come to create your TEDx talk, and the maximum amount of time that you can talk for at a TEDx talk of 18 minutes, it just takes taking that big idea that you have from your book that you've written and distilling it down and saying, okay, what is the essential point, like one single point that I want to get across that I can use in my TEDx talk? And then looking at like, how is TEDx different from a podcast or something like that? It's a once and done thing. You get up on stage, you give your talk, it gets recorded. TED puts it online as long as you haven't broken any of the rules that they have. And that that logo, the TEDx brand, is so powerful that it helps you facilitate conversations when you are wanting to go do a podcast tour or something like that. So you pitch yourself and you say, hey, and here's a link to my TEDx talk. People can click on that. They can see automatically that you are a trusted speaker, that you do have a message, that you know what you're talking about, that you have powerful energy. And so it really sets you up for a lot of success to continue doing public speaking events like podcast guesting in the future.
I see what you're saying. It's really about the brand. Like that brand is really helping to elevate you and being positioned and talking on that particular idea or topic. And I love that you're helping people do this. Talk a little bit about your coaching and what that looks like. How do you actually help someone who's not there yet to being on TED, right? And now their ideas are spreading. What does that look like?
So there are several phases that I take my clients through. We start out, when they come to me, they usually do have that general big idea of like, this is kind of sort of what I maybe want to talk about. And we start from there and we bring that big idea and we refine it and refine it and refine it until we have the idea worth spreading that is super succinct, super clear, super compelling. And from there, we move on to figuring out what sorts of events you want to apply for, because they're all independently organized. And so sort of wrangling that list of opportunities is something that we work on. And then we look at those applications. Every application is going to be different. So we look at the different applications that you're interested in submitting and say, okay, this is a section that we really want to work on. We can write a script for a video, or we can write a synopsis of the talk, or things like that that they're going to ask for. And then one of the biggest hurdles that people often come up against when they're getting ready for a TEDx talk is actually getting their ideas down on paper. And again, like as authors, you've done that. You've done that in a really big way with your book. And so you know what that experience is like. And so I help you brainstorm content, get those ideas down into a rough draft, and then we work together through several iterations, several drafts, until we get to where we're like, this is powerful. We want to get up on our feet. We want to start memorizing. And then memorization is probably the next like big scary thing that people kind of go, oh my goodness, how do I do that?
Yeah.
And so that's one area where my experience as an actor and a director really comes in, is guiding you through, giving you those tools so that you can get up on your feet. I can direct your talk in the same way that I would direct a play, with different gestures and intonations and pacing, so that by the time you get to your event, you are feeling really grounded and you're feeling really confident and you're feeling ready to step out on stage and leave it all out there and pass your message on to the people who are listening and watching.
Man, I love that. And what are some of the like the aftermath, right? Of now you've been on a TEDx stage, you were there, you were grounded, you presented, you did your thing. Now you're on YouTube with that brand, pushing you and helping elevate your positioning. What is sort of the aftermath of that someone can anticipate and expect, even towards like other engagements to speak?
Yeah. So, like most things, it's not something that you can just like do and then sit back and wait. Your TEDx talk is now a tool that you have in your tool chest that you can pull out and you can use to submit articles to written publications that are on that topic, or guiding people back to your talk for additional credibility and additional like getting to know you time, or using it when you pitch to podcasts like we talked about earlier, or things like that, or onto bigger stages, conference stages, summit stages. It's really a great sort of entry level speaking stage, because they're not looking for professional speakers. But then you can use that if speaking is something that you really want to have as part of your brand, or have as a tool for marketing your book. You can use your TEDx talk to say, hey, I've already done this. I had some this big brand put their trust in me. You can put your trust in me too, whether that's a magazine or another stage or a big name podcast that you really want to get on. It's going to give you that extra push. I like to say, and people laugh at me when I say this, but it helps lubricate those conversations. Like the friction dissipates when you can say, I've already done this. Here's this really important brand. And it lends you that trust and that credibility.
That's huge. And I love how your theater experience and acting and directing comes into play. It's like a beautiful merging that comes together. So this has to be super fulfilling for you and of huge value to, to your clients and who you're helping.
I hope so. I think it is. And I certainly love doing it.
Yeah. And in terms of I know that the TEDx stage, right, there are several stages. And there's, like you said, a lot of these are independently run.
Mm-hmm.
How quickly can someone get booked on a TEDx stage, in terms of that process?
So I would anticipate at least a 6-month runway from when you really sit down and you decide to start working at it. So there are there are over 3,500 events globally every year. And they're all locally run, they're all independently organized, so they all have different timelines. TED, the like overseeing organization, suggests that 6 months before the event that the TEDx organizers receive a first draft from their speakers. I'm sure that they're out there. I have not encountered an event that's that far ahead.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
So, for instance, as we're recording this, it's October. I'm looking at events in January, February, March with my current clients, and some of them don't even have their applications out online. So you don't have an opportunity to fill them out yet. So what we work on while we sort of collect that information and wait for things to happen is that's when we start working on the concepts, on the supporting information, on putting ideas down on paper so that we can keep rolling, keep on moving as we wait for those TEDx organizers to little by little say, okay, here's an application, here's an application. And so we can sort of double dip in that way.
That's huge. And two, you mentioned there's the big TED and then there's the more independently run. Can you just give a quick breakdown of
Yeah.
that as an explanation, just in case anyone doesn't know? And there might be something I learned too, because I think I know, but maybe I don't. Like, what
Yeah.
is the difference and
So
the advantage, let's say, to being on the TED versus TEDx? Like, how is that leveraged between the two?
usually when you hear people say, oh, I want to give a TEDx talk, or, oh yeah, I gave a TEDx talk, or this rather, when they say I gave a TED talk or I want to give a TED talk, what they're really meaning is TEDx. So TED started in the 80s. It used to be a once a year conference. It's now twice a year. And that's where you see people like Monica Lewinsky and Bill Gates and those really big name people. You might have also seen Brene Brown on the TED stage, but she gave her TED talk after she had given her TEDx talk. So that's really that TEDx was the foundation for her sort of brand expansion. So TED had been doing their conferences. They started putting their videos out online in 2006, and they realized that there was a really big reach that they hadn't anticipated, that people were really thirsting for this kind of content. And so that's when they decided to start TEDx. And the X in TEDx is that indicator that it's independently organized, it's local. The licenses are free to become an organizer, but there are a bunch of, uh, hoops to jump through of attending different trainings and things like that. And so that's really the difference, is that TEDx is sort of like the offspring of TED.
That's awesome. It makes a lot of sense, and it kind of gives a perspective to the, hey, this is like foundational, and you can, grow and position yourself to be on the TED stage. But either or, it's still going to be powerful and still be greatly beneficial to anyone who's going to jump on that stage and go through that process. So I'm curious as well, as we're starting to wrap up the conversation, like, who is really a good candidate for being on a TEDx stage as well as working with you, right? And also feel free to share a link where they can get in touch with you as well, if they're interested, because I highly recommend this to anyone. It's definitely something that I'm putting down on my list of things to do. Hopefully, accomplish that by the end of next year. So we'll see. But yeah, share a little bit about who's really best suited for this experience, and even more specifically working with you, who's a good candidate, and then how they can reach out to you.
So I think that the biggest thing when you're saying, like, am I a person who should give a TEDx talk, is having that message. I went for a long time. I realized very early that I wanted to give a TEDx talk way back when they started. And at the time I was working as an actor, and I didn't that wasn't something I was putting energy toward. But then I had a specific life experience that just like gave me an epiphany of, oh my goodness, this is it. This is the message that I need to talk about. And so my TEDx talk is called The Brave Leap Sideways, and that's a whole thing. um, but until that point, I wasn't ready. I didn't know what I wanted to talk about. I knew I wanted to get on the stage, but I wasn't ready for that. And so that's the biggest point that I would make. And then if you have a message that you want to share, but you haven't had any public speaking experience, and I don't mean like going and giving a speech somewhere, but like if you haven't gone and done a Facebook Live, if you haven't been a guest on a podcast, if you haven't hosted your own workshop or webinar, even if it's virtual, those are the kinds of things that I want you to do a handful of them before you start your TEDx adventure. But I also don't want you to get stuck in that phase and think you have to collect all of these experiences. You don't. You just need to have familiarity with what it's like to be speaking and knowing that someone is listening and paying attention to you. And so having your idea, getting a foundational level of half a dozen experiences, whether that's on your own platform or someone else's, those are the things that I really want you to have in place before you decide to take that first step toward TEDx.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. So have a message, have done some speaking before, and be ready to also to just to go through the process, because it's not like, oh, I'm just going to sign up and do this next month. This is a process where you have to apply and really go through these steps. So, so this is great, Cathlyn. Where can people reach out to you and get connected if they want support in this area?
So the first place that I want to guide people is to my TEDx planner. And you can find that on my website. It's rightcatcreative.com, RIGHT, catcreative.com/TEDx planner. And the planner is both a calendar and a checklist that's really designed so that you are never having to ask, like, what is my next step? It tells you what order to do things in. It tells you how long to estimate for, writing your first draft or getting your edits done, or how long it might take to memorize. And so that's where I want you to look. If you're at all thinking about fitting TEDx into your calendar for the next year, take a look at that. And then you can also find me on social media. I'm on LinkedIn, my first and last name, Cathlyn Melvin. I'm on Facebook. You can find my personal page that I use for business at my first and last name, or Right Cat Creative. And then I'm on Instagram at Right Cat Creative as well. So those are the big three.
Amazing. So good. That planner sounds like a good tool. Absolutely. If anyone's interested in that, yes, you have to just go get it. Go download it, and definitely reach out to Cathlyn for help in this. She's, as you can see, a wealth of knowledge and resources in this area. And it sounds like, just saying, she makes it fun too, because you get that theater side and all that gets integrated into it. So that's beautiful. So, so Cathlyn, thank you so much for being here and joining us for a conversation on this topic. I think it's going to really help a lot of people who are really trying to figure out what that next step looks like if they want to go and be on a TEDx stage. And so I'll leave us with this question I'll ask you, which is, what is your one word? If there was one word that you could leave behind from Cathlyn Melvin to the world, what would that one word be?
It's joy.
Joy. Oh yeah.
Joy. One of my values in life and in business is to seek joy. And that's certainly something that I try to help my clients do throughout their TEDx adventure as well.
Yes, I love that. I love that, joy. And that's beautiful. Any other last parting words of advice for the listeners?
Ooh, last parting advice. I think to know that it is never too soon for a TEDx talk. I think a lot of people have a TEDx talk pinned up on their vision board, but they look at the TEDx talks that they see online and they're like, oh my goodness, this person is so much further along in their career, or this person has already had X number of accolades. It's not time for me yet. But when you've got that message that's on your heart, it's time.
Yeah.
And take that adventure.
Absolutely. Cathlyn, thank you so much. So glad you were here and we got to capture this conversation. So thanks again. And thanks for those that have tuned into this episode. This is the Author's Leverage, and we have a number of conversations like this that support authors, speakers, thought leaders, in whatever direction that you want to go as it relates to expanding and getting your message out there even further. And a TEDx stage has to be on your list. It just does. So thank you for being here. And at the Author's Leverage, we're all about helping authors who have a book turn that into an online course, an online experience that's going to take your readers from where they are to another in-depth level of actually experiencing your knowledge on a different level. So thanks again. If you ever need help with any of that, we're here. You can reach out to us, check the links below, and check out some of our resources as well outside of this podcast. But Cathlyn, thanks again for being here. This was a great conversation.